Chapter 43 of the Tanya, but I have a wonderful announcement to make before we begin this Kabbalah class, and that is, some months ago we had a project of printing our own copy of the Tanya. We've been learning this text from a very popular edition with a translation, but there is a sort of project that was put out by the last master of this line of Kabbalah, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who's the Alter Rebbe's 7th generation protege, so to speak. And one of the projects that he asked us to do is to actually print copies of the Tanya in as many places as possible. And the reason has to do with a quite an amazing letter that is actually in the library in New York of the whole Chabad kind of Hasidic kabbalistic thing. They have a copy of this letter from the Baal Shem Tov, so I want to share that to you, and then I'll explain what's happening today, because it's kind of an exciting day for me. So, in this letter, it actually happened on Rosh Hashanah, so Shana Tova to everybody that just passed. On the day of Rosh Hashanah, the Baal Shem Tov, the first Hasidic master, had this amazing elevation where his soul went up and he saw all these other souls, some going up, some coming down. He describes them. And he said it was quite dangerous, so he asked his own master to come with him, and he elevated all the way up to the level of the chamber of what we call in traditional Judaism, Mashiach, the Messiah, what Reform Judaism thinks of as, the pinpoint of the Messianic era. But of course, the Baal Shem Tov said, I went to the chamber of Mashiach, and he asked him, when are you going to come, right? Because what does any Kabbalistic master ask the soul of the Mashiach if they're in their chamber in heaven? He says, when are you coming? We've been waiting for so long. And the Mashiach answered, by this you will know, in the time when your teaching will become public and revealed to the world, and your well springs will burst forth to the farthest extremes, that which I have taught you and you have comprehended. So, and the letter goes on, but that was the essence of the letter, is that what's going to bring this Messianic era that, as we've said, we're all working towards, when the well springs of this new Kabbalistic teaching called Hasidus burst to the farthest extremes. So, the Rebbe of the system said, what does that mean? It means you should print the Alter Rebbe's Tanya, which the Alter Rebbe was a student of the Maggid Mizrich, which was the main disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. So this is the Baal Shem Tov's teachings. Printed in as many places as possible. And they started, I think, in the 50s, or I don't know when the campaign started exactly, the 70s maybe. They brought trucks and they printed in this city and that city and in Russia and wherever they went. Well, we who are learning Tanya thought, why not have that project continue and print a Tanya right at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield? And there was some delays, and it took a while, and of course, there's a lot of people doing other projects. I want to thank Rick, who is here in the class, who took the bull by the horns and got the project finished in a beautiful fashion. And I want to thank everybody who donated, a lot of the students here who donated to help with the printing. But they just arrived, Temple Israel's own printed Tanya, here in a beautiful cover. And this is like a Hebrew version with the same printing as the original Tanya. And this is printed, this is an actual edition of the Tanya with the title page. And we have a number. I forget where the number is. You remember where it is, Rick? I won't spend your time looking for it now. They're in here somewhere. And then in the back is all the thank yous to everybody that donated. So thanks to everybody who helped us out with it. And the amazing thing is, what's the day when the Tanyas arrived, Rick, at your house? You can unmute and say, when did the Tanyas arrive in your house? What was the day?
I came home from services on Rosh Hashanah day, and on my front porch with this box of Tanyas.
Ha! See, so you might say, okay, there's a 1 in 300 and whatever chance that it arrived then, but of course Kabbalah says no coincidence whatsoever. That was the very day when the Baal Shem Tov's soul went up and had this elevation and was told, your teachings have to reach the farthest place, the place you could least imagine them being taught. That's where they need to reach. And I think if you ask the people that generally have learned this for the past 300 years, Where's the last place you'd imagine they'd say, what a great idea, let's learn Kabbalah, let's print a Tanya. It might be at the biggest Reformed temple in the world, which now people are excited about Tanya. We have, 115,000 views on our first Kabbalah class. We have people coming and learning. So, Yesher Koach, we now have our own printed Tanya. We're going to have the next class, which I think is not till the 30th. We'll try and do at temple a little party with some nice food and a l'chaim, and I'll have copies for everybody in the class. And if you are in the class but you can't make it, just email me or email Maya at temple-israel.org. We'll put you on a list of getting you the books. But that'll be kind of the book release that day. So thanks, Rick. Thanks to everybody that helped with it. And the most important thing, of course, is as that Rebbe that started this project said, you don't want to put it on a shelf. You want to make sure you put it in your heart. So now that we got it, let's learn right from this. Rick, you have yours at home, right? So it's page 122. Look at the top there that we're on. Chapter 43. It's kind of giving me chills. It's kind of fun. Is everybody else excited about this, or is it just me? It's exciting. I mean, the Rosh Hashanah piece, that was nice. So let's start. Bring everybody up to speed who's been learning with us online. Chapter 43, we're wrapping up the topic of yira, of reverence or awe of God. And we learned that there's two types of awe, a lower and a higher awe. And within the lower awe, there's even two categories. There's a contracted and expanded, which have to do with whether you're using the physical world to create awe of God or using the spiritual worlds to create awe of God, which is a much more expanded kind of awe. And then we learned about an actual higher level of awe, yira ilah, which has nothing to do with the worlds at all, where you recognize that because the worlds don't exist, you're relating just to God. You're forgetting about the worlds entirely. And in that way, you're not being in awe of what God's making or doing, you're being in awe of God's essence directly. It's like, if I were to hear a spectacular cantor that just vocally was head and shoulders above me, and their runs were head and shoulders above me, and they were such a pious person, I heard them praying with such sincerity that I can't even compare myself. And if I were to meet that person, I'd feel so sheepish I wouldn't want to open my mouth, right? I just feel in awe of who they are, not of the power they have over the world or the wealth they have. Just that person, their actual being, it puts me in awe, and I feel nullified. Now we're going to move. It's a big shift. So we're if you're here in this version of the Tanya, we're on page 661, and we're moving to the topic of love. And we're going to stay on this topic right through to chapter 51, because this is a major topic, of course, and there's all kinds of levels and meditations that we're going to share of how to inspire the different levels of love to add the wings of love and awe more powerfully to everything you do. So let's go in. I'm going to be reading at least the first chunk from here. והנה באהבה יש גם כן שתי מדרגות, אהבה רבה ואהבת עולם. אהבה רבה היא אהבה בתענוגים, והיא שלהבת העולה מאליה, ובאה ממעלה בבחינת מתנה למי שהוא שלם ביראה. Let's just do the first chunk, now in love.
Now in love, too, there are two grades, Ahavat Rabbah and Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Rabbah is a love of delight and ecstasy, a love of God which delights in him. There is no other desire or goal present, such as the desire to cleave to him or to expire in one's yearning for him. The love itself is comprised purely of delight in him and cleaving to him.
So we did introduce this last week. Just like there's two major levels in yira, in reverence, there's also two major levels, two categories of love. Ahavat Olam, which is love relating to any kind of creation, and Ahava Rabbah, which is a great love. And there's three qualities we want to understand about Ahava Rabbah. The first is that it's not characterized by yearning. It's not characterized by seeking after something, right? I walk by a restaurant and I look through the window and I see a big chocolate sundae with a banana, but I'm in a rush. I can't get to the restaurant. It's crowded. I can't get a table. I'm not going to get that chocolate sundae. And I experience a yearning, right? Because there's me and there's this chocolate sundae and there's a separation, right? And now I start, depending on how much I go into it, I could really, go deep on this chocolate sundae. Or, as I said, when you were in high school and suddenly some person walked by and smiled and said hello, and suddenly feelings started, but you didn't know them, you don't have their phone number, how can you talk to them? And the distance creates a kind of fiery love, a yearning. So that's a lot of love is distinguished by that yearning. This is the opposite. Tanugim means a quiet pleasure, a close pleasure. So that's not the love of something that's far away. That's like the love between siblings, right? The love between siblings is not something, they were never far off. You were always in the same family. You were always from the same source. You didn't have to work to create love. You didn't have to think about each other and about each other's qualities. You're comfortable. You can travel and not see each other for a month and then come back and you're siblings. You just are. The love is there. It's already made, and you just are quietly connected without the big yearning. You don't write love poems to your sibling, right? But you're connected in the deepest way. And you might ask, of the two loves, which one is more powerful, right? But let's go on a little. Let me define B'tanugim a little better. Rabbi said, V'hi shal hevet ha'olah me'eleha. Go ahead, Eleanor. Thanks. V'hi shal hevet.
And it is a fiery flame that rises of itself. Man does not create or kindle this love within himself. Rather, it comes forth spontaneously.
Right. So the first quality of this love is that it is Ava betanugim. It's a love characterized by pleasure. Like we said last week, like a couple after 50 years together, sitting on the porch, rocking chairs, playing Scrabble, whatever it might be. Obviously, that the fire from their first date is burning much lower. There's not this passion to passion to reach and connect with each other, but that quiet love that remains is no less powerful. They're even more connected. So the second piece is that it's not just B'tanugim, it is a flame that rises of itself, as in, this is not a love that we can create by our own work. Ava Rabbah is not a love that we can, through meditation, actually construct and build. It's called, it comes from above, and it's a gift that that's given from above, so to speak. And you can see that in two ways. One is the more mystical, where we have stories of people that were just a normal person, and then boom, they woke up and they were enlightened and they saw the oneness of the world. And certainly there's an aspect of that this Ava Rabbah, it's a very lofty form of love, of total connection to the infinite, such that you're not seeking for the infinite. You're actually now aware and connected to the infinite and enjoying that connection. So there is that element that people can just suddenly one day have this love of oneness, and their eyes are in some way open and their heart is opened. But there's another aspect. It's not created because it's already in each of us. Each of us has a point of our soul, which we call the Pintali, the point of our soul that's connected to God, that's always there, and we just need to access it. So whether you see this as, that if you do your work, then that moment of enlightenment may come or may not come, or whether you see it as it's not something we build because we're born with it, it's already within us, the statement is true from both angles. Does that make sense? It's a fast day, so my head is not exactly like going in the normal order that it goes in. So I apologize if I'm a little disjointed this morning. I feel disjointed. So ask questions if I'm a little off track. Uva milamala bifchinat matana lemishahu shalem beira k'noda al maimar rabbanenu zimichem levracha darko shel ish lechzor achar isha she'ava nikrat ish v'zachar.
and it comes from above by way of a gift to he who is perfect in fear, as is known from the saying of the rabbis of blessed memory. It is the way of the man to search for the woman, and in spiritual terms, love is called a man or male. As it is written, he has remembered his loving kindness.
And so this is the third aspect of this higher level of love, Ava Shebetanugim. First is that it's characterized by a quiet sort of inner pleasure. Second is that we don't build it ourselves. It's something you can't construct. You're born with it, and it comes from above. And third is, who does it come to? It comes to somebody who already has yira that is complete, that already has a sense of reverence, as we've learned in the past several chapters, has a sense of yira that is total, that has no gaps in it. And as we learned, what does yira mean? Yira means that I'm totally nullified to the Ein Sof. It means that I have such reverence, I'm in such awe of the Ein Sof, that I'm completely out of the way, I'm surrendered, I'm nullified, and that means that holiness can dwell on me. There's no me there. So because this love is a love which is connecting to the infinite, that means there can't be a me there. The only way I can experience this Ava Shebetanugim is if my fear is already complete, such that my ego is gone. So those are three components. One, it is characterized by pleasure instead of by yearning. Two, we cannot make it ourselves. And three, it comes to a person who already has a complete yira, a yira shalem. And we'll go into this. It's the way of chesed to look after Gevurah. But let's ask this question: which of these two loves do you feel like is greater? And we haven't completely defined avad olam, but it's the opposite, right? A love that's yearning, a love that's fiery, like a love between a married couple where they're just completely infatuated with each other, that you see, and there's love letters and there's dancing and there's romance, versus siblings who are connected, but there's not the love, there's not the flash. Like you might not realize what the connection is because they don't express it, and yet it's there. Which of the two do you guys think is more powerful, is more important, more profound? I don't know. Rick's laughing. Are you laughing because it's obvious, or are you laughing because you can't answer the question?
Ava Rabbah.
Noreen, you're going for Ava Rabbah?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Because it says Rabbah is the most.
Oh, the definition, Rabbah. What could be? But Olam means infinite, right? So there you go. Sharon, what's your take? Oh, sorry, you're muted.
I think they're complementary.
Yeah.
I don't think one can stand without the other. I think they're interconnected, and I think that together they make this total glory.
Yeah, of course, I agree. They're interconnected. I'm curious, just hearing the basic. Which do you feel is a stronger love? Right, love between.
When you talked about marriage,
yeah,
what you talked about in your definition was like the beginning of marriage.
Right.
And then when you talk about the sibling love, that's like when marriage goes on, you have the beginning, but you also have the sibling love.
Yeah.
I mean, you feel close to your spouse in a way that is different than anything else.
Right.
I had a friend who said, "What, you're like a closed corporation." It's just you, which was a great definition. I was asking her before I got married, what do you think? She said, "It's like a closed corporation. It's totally just you two." But
so you're kind of giving the quality. It sounds like you're also leaning towards Ava Rabbah. Cindy, what was your sense?
I think it's the sibling piece, because the sibling piece never goes away. A marriage can fail and that can break apart.
Right.
But that sibling piece is there always.
Yeah. So generally, as the name says, Kabbalah would agree with us. Ava Rabbah is the higher. For anyone listening who thinks, well, hold on, isn't romance, isn't that the most powerful thing, right?
Yeah.
There's a mashal given about two people at a feast, right? So there's a rich, wealthy man, and there's a pauper, a very poor man. And the rich man invites the poor man to have a banquet at his house. And it's, the most delicious food, and servants serving it, and great wine, and gorgeous table settings and everything. And this poor person has not eaten in, 24 hours, has not had anything but bread and water in a few days, and has never had the kind of food that this rich person has in their life, right? So you got this starving poor person and this wealthy person both sitting down for a meal, and they bring out, gorgeous, whatever the appetizers are, and breads and jams and wonderful wine and the main course, and it's all sitting there. And then it's time to go, and what happens? The poor person, well, what does the rich person do, right? The rich person has seen this kind of food before, so they sit back and they start some small talk, and they take a napkin and spread it out, and they enjoy the way the meal looks, and then they pick up their silverware delicately and start cutting a piece off, and they're still talking, and they put it in their mouth, and it tastes good, right? And they take their time, and they seem not so affected by the food, right? Whereas what does the poor person do? The first possible moment when they're allowed to eat, they boom, 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 gobble everything up on their plate, no talking, no nothing. It's such a deep experience of like eating this food they've never had before. And someone looking would say, who's more connected to the food? The rich person or the poor person? In this case, which one is the more powerful love, right? The Ava Shebetanugim, or the Avad Olam, where the poor person is separated from the food. So in this situation, looking at the surface, you'd think Avad Olam is actually the more powerful, right? It's motivating, and that poor person is much more connected to the food. But here's the rub. The next day, when now they're both having another meal, if the poor person goes back to having bread and water for the rest of the day, are they really going to complain? Is it going to bother them? Are they going to make a fuss? They're going to say, I had a nice meal yesterday. I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. Now back to life. Here's my bread and water. If the rich person gets served bread and water, are they going to be happy with that? Are they going to make a fuss? They'll probably lose their top, right? How dare you bring this? This is not fit for me. I'm never going to. So even though the poor person was more motivated and more visibly excited to eat the food and seem more connected, the poor person wasn't really more connected to the food. The rich person was, because it's the rich person that would be harmed in their self-identity if they had to give it up. It's the rich person that was more attached to the food. They just were more comfortable with it. It was part of their identity, so they didn't make a fuss. And same thing here. If you're talking about Ava Shebetanugim, this quiet love that's a pleasure of being close to God, versus Avad Olam, which is a fiery love of wanting to reach something far away. The love that's between things that are separate, it creates more noise, it creates a lot of heat, but once you're connected to something, now that really is part of you, and so that love is seen as being much more powerful. As going on, oh yes, and then you have this piece. It's the way of the, and I apologize for all the gender. This is written in a time of very, very strict gender definitions. So it's male and female here. It's the way of the man to search for the woman, and love is called man or male, as in God remembered God's loving kindness. So what is this about? Ultimately, I mean, you could look at traditional gender roles, and you could even look at the story of Adam and Eve and how Adam lost a rib and that became Eve. And so you look for things that you lost. Your lost things don't look for you. So there's that kind of traditional little piece. But ultimately, this is about Hesed and Gevurah and how they relate. Because as we've learned, the highest form of Chesed is not something you can build. It can only come to you once you have a complete form of Gevurah. So the order that we normally follow in trying to attain these levels of emotion is first we create Avad Olam, which is kind of the easiest, like just I love chocolate, and God made chocolate, so I love God. Then the lower level of fear comes. Then the higher level of fear comes, and only after that can the higher level of love come. So I know the Alter Rebbe said you need to always have a level of awe in everything, but in terms of the actual meditations, it's usually lower love, lower fear, higher love. And the way that higher love comes is only because once I complete one of those lower levels of fear, now Chesed is going to be attracted to Gevurah. And let's define Chesed and Gevurah for anyone who's not familiar. Chesed often we call love and kindness, and Gevurah we call strength. But sometimes we think Chesed is being nice and giving, and Gevurah is being mean and holding back and not giving. And I want to make sure no one misunderstands. That's not really what Chesed and Gevurah are, because if we're defining Chesed as being male and Gevurah as being female, that doesn't make sense, right? I think intuitively, from seeing the world, it's not that men are nice and like to give and women are mean and like to withhold. That's not at all the case, right? Look at what a father does and what a mother does typically in the world, right? So what Chesed and Gevurah mean is Chesed gives, but Chesed gives without considering the recipient. Chesed just gives, absolutely, without any sense of measuring according to who's being given to. Gevurah also gives, but Gevurah gives according to what the recipient needs. Gevurah gives according to what the recipient needs. So if that's the definition, which one is more typically like how men bestow, and which is more like how women bestow? And which one is more about me, and which one is more about the other person? Right? So when Chesed gives just because it's the nature of Chesed to give and nothing to do with the recipient. And an example is when Avraham circumcised himself and then was sitting in his tent, and God said, he's in pain. I'm going to make it a really hot day so no travelers come by so he doesn't have to get up and do anything, as a kindness to Avraham. And what happened to Avraham, this paragon of Chesed? Avraham was sitting in anguish because there were no guests to come by for him to give food to and to give water to and to give wisdom to. It was actually harder for Avraham to sit there, and he was looking for guests, and it was so hot no one was coming. So that's Avraham. He wanted to give because he couldn't stand not giving. He wanted to give because he had this desire to give in himself that was so strong. It wasn't like, oh, there's no guests, so fine, no need to give. Doesn't bother me. It actually bothered him to not be able to give. So Avraham's giving was just about, not just, but it expressed his own need to give. It was his need such that when there's not a guest, now he's in some anguish. Whereas Gevurah only gives when there's someone that needs something and it's appropriate to give it. Right? So Gevurah, if there's no guest, is not going to sit in anguish. Gevurah's going to say, oh, if a guest comes, good, let me give them what they need. But if not, why would that bother me? So which of these is more about me and which is more about the recipient? Chesed or Gevurah? Right? Chesed, love, is really about my feelings. And also when I express love, it's about my feelings. Whereas Gevurah, strength, here it's about what does the other person need, and I give them only that. And of course, there's compassion too, which means even if they don't deserve it, I'm still going to give them what they need, right? But not because I need to give, because they still need it.
Doesn't make sense to me.
How so?
Well, look at all the women of the Exodus. They were all totally giving. Look at Pharaoh's daughter. I mean, they were totally giving. It doesn't make sense. Giving with restraints just seems a little more male to me.
Huh.
And like.
So let me put it this way.
Yeah,
Let's go super gender stereotypes. With how traditionally, when you celebrate an anniversary, what do you do? Right? Or when in the 50s when a husband proposed to a wife, it was always the big ring, right? How do men typically give? I'm going to buy jewelry, I'm going to get flowers, I'm going to give a ring. Whereas I'll say in my marriage, how does my wife give? every day, all the time, what I need, shopping and food and clothing and
Look at
cleaning.
all the male prophets and how they gave.
Yeah, so let me wrap this point up and see how it connects, because prophets can be different, right? So when traditionally, like, a man's giving, if you look at it, there's often a sense of, I'm giving something that makes it apparent that I gave, right? If I give someone a big ring with a rock, now they wear it, and I see that people see that I gave something, right? If I give flowers, they're on a table, people see that I gave something, and typically there's kind of that need wrapped up with all the typical, like, male gendered gifts. Whereas if my wife does more laundry than me, I mean, do people know that? Do people see that? If my wife shops more than me, do people see that, right? That she doesn't need, in her giving, she doesn't need anyone to see or know that she's giving. She's just giving because there's a need, right? And so if her family needs it, she does it, and more than I do.
Hesed is female to me. She's more giving. You just made the point.
Well, I mean, I don't think I made the point, because I think in our relationship, my wife gives to me more than I give to her.
That's
So
right.
I think everything she does is more.
So Hesed is female.
Yeah, but what qualifies Hesed and Gevurah is not giving more, giving less. That's my point. What qualifies Hesed and Gevurah is giving out of my own need to give versus giving because the recipient needs it. So that this is a good conversation, right? Because when I say Gevurah is restraint in giving, it doesn't mean that Gevurah is going to be less generous. It just means that Gevurah is going to consider what the recipient needs, and that might be much more than Chesed. I may be happy, writing a card for Valentine's Day. There, I've written my card. I've done it. I haven't considered, are there other things my family needs that perhaps, don't express my need for Chesed, but that express their needs to be provided for. So it's not that Gevurah is going to give less, it's that Gevurah is going to give for the other person, and Chesed is going to give for itself. Yeah? I see some hands. Sharon, go ahead.
It just doesn't click in for me.
I think what you're saying is that the female is more sensitive to the needs of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Which would be Gevurah.
Gevurah, yes, exactly.
Because she doesn't give everything. She's just sensitive to those needs and gives what they need. Where the male is not as sensitive, will just.
Yes, Sharon?
Yeah, I think that we're confusing I think that your example confuses the issue and the point you're trying to make. Because if you just continue with the whole gender thing, which I'm sorry we have to do here, in this traditional male role, it is men who have the money and the assets, and they can buy things and they can give things and material things. And it's very important in traditional male ethos that they provide well for their family, that they have things that the outside society can see that they've done well, that they have money, etc. Women traditionally had no control, in general, had no control, unless they were widows, had no control over money, and could not give material things in that way. And therefore, the male gift looks flashy because everyone can see it. The female gift is everything she has to give, which is her skills and her love and her nurturing. This is like a really, stereotype thing here that I'm saying here, but I think what you're getting at probably can't be defined by gender. But you're talking about two kinds of love. You're talking about one kind of love, which is a traditional gift. That's an obvious gift, that here's a thing that it can sit on the shelf, etc., be on the finger. And here is nurturing love, which is of our livingness, that we all need to eat and sleep and have, and like clean houses. And I think that really, especially now, men and women have blended these things so much that I think I think there could be, I think that their example of male and female is confusing us about these different kinds of love.
That may be, and it is socially complicated, as you're saying, of course, and even the most traditional views, we get that men have Hesed and Gevurah and women have Hesed and Gevurah, so we're not unidimensional. Like, we all include both. So let me try a different example: the son and a teacher. Okay, so those are two examples of Hesed and Gevurah that are also used. So maybe let's leave the gender thing. So a teacher. You know what? I think we've exhausted this one. You kind of get it, right? Chesed and Gevurah. Chesed is giving for its own sake because there's a need to give. Gevurah is giving because the recipient needs. And in this case, reel back our conversation to my Chesed flow and my Gevurah flow. What we want to know is, if we want the highest level of ahava, of love, what we do is we establish a sense of yira, a complete sense of love. And by the way, it can be a lower yira. It doesn't have to be the yira ilah. It can be yira tata that's complete. And once that's there, now I can have access to the higher level of love, because until I am surrendered, until I have a sense of self-nullification, there's no way that my love is going to be able to be this ahava rabbah, because that love comes from, as we'll see, Atzilus. That love comes only where there's no other ego. There's only the oneness of the infinite. So that's his point about Chesed follows after Gevurah. And 62, V'isha yirat Hashem kanoda. While a woman, I forget where we're at in the readings.
While a woman symbolizes fear of God, as is known.
ובלי קדימת היראה אי אפשר להגיע לאהבה רבה זו, כי אהבה זו היא מבחינת אצילות, דלי טעמן קיצוץ ופירוד חס ושלום.
Without the prerequisite of fear, it is impossible to attain the level of Rabba.
Rabbi, yeah.
For this love originates from the realm of Atzilut, wherein there is no sundering or separateness, God forbid.
So this is exactly what we said. Atzilus is the highest spiritual world, and it's defined by total self-nullification. Right? Atzilus exists above the concept of any created entity. So it's only in the world below Bria where you can have something that says, well, I can exist. I can be an anything. Atzilus is just emanated from God, just pure oneness. So how could I access something that flows from the world of Atzilus if I still have an ego? It's never gonna connect with that. So that's why I need to have this be shalom b'yira. I have to be complete in my yira, and then I'm out of the way, and now maybe I can have that flow from the level of Atzilus. Now we're going to go to the lower level of love, ahavat olam. Ach, ahavat olam hi haba'a mehatvuna v'dat b'tgulat Hashem ein sof baruch hu ha-memale kol almin v'sovev kol almin. Good. Marcus, you got that one? Oh, you'll need to unmute. Thanks.
Sorry about that. Ahavat olam, however, the second and lower level of love, is that which comes from understanding and knowledge of greatness of God, the blessed self, all and vitality, and encompasses all worlds, animating them with the vitality which transcends them, not being limited by the worlds and being it animates.
All right, so now we have the whole second category of love, and we'll learn about this in the next 7 chapters. And that is not something that is related to being close to God. It actually comes from understanding how God is creating and filling the worlds and even encompassing the worlds, and animating them with this vitality that flows in them and transcends them. And when I look at the worlds and I think to myself, oh, there's some infinite being creating this, it fills me with a sense of wanting to reach and connect that created being, but I can't. I'm in the worlds. I'm focused on the worlds. I'm dealing with reality here, with physical reality or spiritual reality. And so that creates not this sense of pleasure of being close to something, but it creates that sense of wanting to reach something, the typical energy of a seeker and wanting to find spirituality or find God. So 3 categories, just like we had 3 categories of Ava Shebetanugim, they want to keep in mind as we learn the meditations. Avat Olam is the opposite. Instead of being characterized by pleasure, this one is characterized by yearning. So whereas Ava Rabbah is considered love like water, which is tranquil and still, Avat Olam is like fire, which is rising up and leaping and trying to kind of leap back to its spiritual source up above, so to speak. And then the second piece, Ava Shebetanugim, is a present from above, something that's deep within our soul, or that comes as a gift once it's appropriate. And this one we actually can build. This is a product of our avodah, of our work and our meditation. So when we're starting with Avat Olam, we should know that the time we spend sitting and the time we spend focusing on divine concepts, that is directly building the flow of Avat Olam that we have access to, that allows us to elevate our Torah and mitzvahs. So this one we want to work on, and we can directly build it. And 3, while the higher level of Ava Rabbah only comes to someone that's already completed a perfect quality of yira, of reverence, this love can come whatever level your awe is at. Right? Obviously, it's better, as the Alter Rebbe said, to have a basic level of yira, of respect, and then the love will be of a higher quality. But as a typical kind of person that my consciousness is not always nullified before God, now I can still have this love come to me. It's not something that's so out there that I really need to have this complete love and then wait and hope it comes. Yes, Eleanor?
Is the love black and white, or is there some in-betweenness too?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. My instinct, I'm going on a ledge here. This isn't something I haven't seen that question addressed. I think there is a black and whiteness to it, right? Because when it comes to my ego, it's there or it's not there. And even if it's there in a subtle way, it's still there. And then there's a quantum leap when the ego's not there. So I think there's a lot of gray area in terms of the levels within Avat Olam and the gradations in that. And there's also lots of gray in the levels within Ava Rabbah. But really, you're either coming from Atzilus or you're not, right? And even though I'm saying it's black and white, I'm sure there's like a gray area somebody's looked at and some of the Rebbes have taught about. But it seems to me this really is, it's either you're working still with an ego and you're trying to soften it, or you have complete fear and now Ava Rabbah, you're connected to God and you're just having pleasure from that. You're not seeking God anymore. But I'm not sure of that answer. So now's the meditation. We're learning about the meditation for Avat Olam. You meditate on the greatness of God, and you look at the world, and you can look at the world around you. You can imagine the skies. You can imagine the Grand Canyon. You can look at life's experiences, and then we meditate that God first fills all worlds, and then also encompasses all worlds. And these are actually two definite levels of godliness that we also want to understand. So we're still in the last paragraph here. So Memale Kol Almin, filling the worlds, that's a level of God that relates to and tapers itself and adapts itself to whatever it is that it has to create. And so we learned that the world is always being created at every moment, all the time. The world's not doesn't have its own reality. It's real, but its reality is entirely dependent on God's reality, and God is creating the world at every nanosecond, every quantum moment. And how does that happen? Anything that's being created, this hand, God is using letters to create this hand and is giving it all the qualities that a hand needs, thank God, right? It's the shape, it's got life force, it can move, right? It has sensory input where it can feel things. So the hand is getting all the energy that a hand needs. This pen also exists, but the pen is getting energy a pen needs. So it's just mechanical. It's just stuff. It can't animate itself. It doesn't have senses. There's not a life force like in my hand. And there's a difference between the godly energy going to the hand versus the godly energy going to the pen or a rock. And likewise, a cat and a tree and a breeze and a cloud. Everything has its own divine energy, which God is speaking through what we call letters, and which is constantly creating that object. And the light that is filling the worlds, that is the divine energy that is adjusting itself to the needs of what it is creating at every moment. So it's filling the world. So on one hand, I meditate on the light that is creating everything around me, right? I'm in a house, and there's certain divine light creating the house, and if I meditate on that, that will, well, I love my house, I like living in it, so, wow, God's creating that, and now I have a little feeling of warmth to God, like, thanks, God, for creating this house. It sounds simple, but if you sit with it and you focus on it, you'll actually start to create emotions for the infinite in an abstract way that, as the Alter Rebbe will say, used to be attached to the house. And now I'm taking them off the house and I'm putting them onto the infinite. Or if I love, as I often say, let's say chicken soup, right? A nice bowl of chicken soup. I love thinking about it. Well, think of the light that's going into that chicken soup, and now I'm taking it from the chicken soup and I'm putting it to the abstract. So instead of having a love that's broken up and attached to many different things, I'm unifying that love and I'm attaching it all to one abstract, infinite locus. Right? So that's it's work, as we'll see, to take your love off of the things that it's attached to that are in the world, and now unify that on God, and that's Avar Olam and the filling light. There's also Sovev Kol Amin, the light that surrounds the world. And that's an even higher level of divine energy, because that is light which is making the world exist. So it does relate to the world, but it doesn't care what it's creating. And why doesn't it care what it's creating? Because it's at such a high level that every single thing that it's creating is exactly the same as every other thing that it's creating. Right? So I think my hand is such a miracle. Look at all the muscles and the nerves and the care God's to create it. And compared to a pebble, one is just so much infinitely more complex and miraculous than the pebble. So I'm thinking, well, the light that God's creating is just, God put so much more energy into my hand. Thank you, God. But to the light that is surrounding the world, it's all the same thing. It's so infinitely above us that the difference between a pebble and the miracle of the hand is nothing. They're the same thing. To that level of infinite light, every single piece of the universe, the greatest heavens, are exactly the same as a single grain of sand. It's all just like, yeah, I'm creating it. Makes no difference, right? I'm so infinitely above it that every single level is all just this one level. It's all just basically nothing. So that's another one where now I move my meditation to recognizing not just the light that's making the world, but there's even a light that's above that, to which everything that impresses me is basically just the same. It's all just happened to creating a universe. And now a third level that's still Avad Olam, V'chula Kameh Kla Mamash Chashiv Uchevitul Dibur Echad Banefesh Hamaskelet Beodo B'machashavta O B'chemdat Halev Kaniskar La'el.
And before whom everything is accounted as nothing at all, like the nullity of one utterance within the intelligent soul, while it is still in its thought or in its desire of the heart, as has been explained earlier.
Right, so this isn't even third level, right? One level I can meditate on is the godliness that creates everything. Two is the godliness surrounding everything, to which all created levels are basically the same. And then there's a third level, which says there is no world, there is no anything. Right? At that level of godliness, completely unchanged before and after creation, and there, even the most impressive world, which is, basically the same as a grain of sand, even that doesn't exist at all. right? There's a level of God before whom everything is just absolutely nothing. And if I really sit and again meditate on that level, now hold on. If the world is absolutely nothing, why would I love anything in the world? Right? Why am I spending my emotional energy on, what in the East they call this illusion? What we say is nothing. It's a real nothing. But if I recognize it's nothing, now why don't I want to meet God? Don't I want to connect to God? And so again, this is all meditations to create a sense of longing, a sense of trying to bridge that separation. And then what I do with that love, I attach it to my learning here. I attach it to the mitzvahs that I do. I attach it to, printing a nice Tanya like Rick did. And then the mitzvah is elevated with a powerful sense of love that goes along with my yira. So apologize again if I was a little disjointed. It's a fast day and I was up early, so my mind is a little elsewhere. But I hope the points came through. Let's pick this up when we come back, and we'll do a little meditation before we finish. So you find yourself in a comfortable position. And we're going to focus on Ahavat Olam. We're going to focus on that third level. So let's breathe in and out quietly and gently. Yeah, as we breathe, perhaps reflect that we don't always notice our breathing, and yet we're so attached to it. It's definitely an example of that kind of Ava Shebatanugim, where we're so connected to our breath we sometimes don't notice it, and yet if you're unable to breathe, imagine the sense of needing it back, right? So there, something can be so powerful and yet sometimes out of our awareness. Let's bring it into awareness and start a counted breathing. We'll breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the breath in. 2, 3, 4. Breathing out. 2, 3, 4, and stay empty. 2, 3. Starting again, breathing in. 2, 3, 4. Remain there. 3, 4. Releasing out. 2, 3. Continue that pattern on your own, through your nose if it's comfortable. Let's open up our wisdom gateway. Familiar with the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. Continue breathing in this even cycle. And let that gateway open wide. I'm going to put the divine concept in this gateway. The whole world that was just created, this whole coming year, everything in it. All my experiences, the physical world, all of that is absolutely nothing compared to the Ein Sof. Non-existent at all. Including my own ego. Just let that concept fill your mind. The whole world, everything that we are in, everything that's coming up, has no truth of its own. It's all nothing. Absolutely nullified. Let that divine concept fill your mind. Don't worry if it's difficult, if it's challenging. Just let it keep filling the mind with more and more detail. Let's see if that divine concept of an infinite God before whom the world is nothing, if that creates an emotion in you. Perhaps a longing for something more real, something with its own reality. And if you'd like to remain in this posture for 5, 10, 15 minutes, we'll create much stronger impressions in the neuroplasticity of your mind. in our class. Now's the time to wiggle our fingers and toes, our miraculous hands. Open our eyes. Thanks, everyone. So, like I said, next class, we hope you will join us in person. We'll try our very best to be at Temple on the 30th, and we'll have a nice party to release and give out everybody's Tanyas. You can each have a copy. It's Hebrew, but you can kind of, I'll tell you where the page is, and we kind of work from it a little, and really make sure that this pathway of growing and learning really makes it into our hearts, and continues the upward climb of the whole world. So, Yesher Koach. We'll see you guys next time. I'm signing off on Facebook.